Where does your sustenance come from? A reflection on providence, care, and trust. I think this is how it happened. At least that's what I heard. A car drives hurriedly into my community, screeches to a halt right by the pond. The passenger door flings open with this young woman stepping out looking suspicious. She looks left and right to make sure no one is around. And then she drops off a duck with a broken and infected wing by the pond. Jumping back into the car, she closes the door and the car speeds off. One of my neighbors saw the whole thing unfold from their patio. Okay, maybe it wasn't this dramatic, but it was basically what happened, or so I heard. This duck wasn't even from this part of the world, yet it was left here abandoned to fend for itself. The real trouble with this approach was the other ducks already living in the pond wouldn't accept it. So they pecked at it, they bullied it, and pushed it out as a way of protecting their own pack from the vulnerability that came with having an injured species around. Now, this should have been the end of the story. A defenseless duck, injured and alone, unable to compete for resources. But as life would have it, Michelina was back from school around this time. You see, Michelina had a gift. It would seem like animals would cool their nerves around her. I could almost say she could talk to any animal. So she noticed this dog and, without hesitation, began to care for it. She hand fed it, then later built a small shelter for it. She named it, and I cannot remember the name right now. Uh, Pardon me, Michelina. She called vets and did whatever she could to give it a chance. From then on, I would watch from the bench each day as this dog slowly regained strength and confidence. I watched as it learned to find peace, knowing it didn't need to fight the other dogs for resources. By evening, it would leave the shelter Michelina made and sit by the pond next to where Milo and I would spend time. There, it would rest in safety, knowing it would make it through the night. How merciful life had been to bring this dog to a pond where the one person most inclined to nurture happened to be. Was it a coincidence or providence? A lesson in trust. In the midst of the turbulence that is life right now, the layoffs, the closure of various agencies, the downsizing of departments and companies, the encroachment of artificial intelligence as a potential competitor for the sources of livelihood of many, the gnawing sense of instability in the economy. Well, you do not need to be telepathic to sense the feelings of uncertainty everywhere. My gosh, even I sometimes feel the sense of ease when I conclude yet another day not having to attend one of those familiar invitations by HR to talk about severance options. I can't help but borrow insight from the non personal aspect of life, the life of birds. As I took a walk this afternoon, I could not help but see how almost every house in my neighborhood had fancy bird feeders hanging somewhere in their property. I was also reminded that I also had to stock up on bird seeds for the feeder in my own backyard. Oh, wait, think about that. Birds don't plant or harvest or store grain in barns, yet so many of us humans make sure they have the option to feed from fancy bird feeders. So I watch as birds swoop down happily to claim scraps in parking lots or on benches. During a recent trip to Chicago, I watched in fascination as pigeons would wait perched on window sills looking out for that one person who would come scatter seeds on the floor while they swooped down to eat as much as they could. The world, it seems, conspires in their favor. It was written of the great mystic Jesus that he once said, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet they are fed." You see, the birds don't calculate the state of the economy. They don't forecast the stock market. They wake, they stretch their wings, and they fly. And that's enough for them. Addressing the skeptics and the cynical bits of this narrative. Of course, the skeptics would object. They would say, but don't some birds die of hunger or sickness? And they're right, some do. But that's no proof against the gem of this insight. The point was never that no bird will ever die. Every living thing dies. The point is that birds do not spend their short lives crushed under the weight of imagined futures. Oh gosh, don't I need to remember this? I bet you if the records were accurate, when Jesus said, "Do not worry," he wasn't promising a shield against death. He was pointing to a way of living, a life without the bondage of anxiety. Worry does not add a single day to our lives, but it does take the joy out of the days we already have. So the ducks and pigeons and sparrows and crows live without the burden of projection. They meet the day with whatever is present. They take what is given. They move on when it is gone. They live inside providence, not outside it. So the invitation. And so I ask myself, and I ask you, where does your sustenance come from? Is it really from your job title or your savings accounts, your projections about the market? Or is there something deeper, something that has always carried life forward long before we calculated and forecasted? Isn't it obvious yet that all of what we have done so far to even provide for ourselves was never really ours, never really yours to own, by the way? Oh, you don't know that yet? You have never once provided for yourself. You want to bet? So the duck with the broken wing should really not have survived. Yet it did. Not by its own strength or will, but by a chain of random mercies. Birds across the neighborhood should be starving, yet they're not. Because somehow food finds them, whether in feeders or in the fields. Perhaps the invitation is to live as they do, to trust enough to spread our wings each morning without demanding to know how the next seed will come. To live with less worry, less clutching, less fear of tomorrow. After all, tomorrow has never belonged to us. Only this moment does. And I have some prompts for reflection. How much joy do you lose to forecasting futures that may never come? I'll repeat that. How much joy do you lose to forecasting futures that may never come? Which of your worries are about things you cannot control? And what would happen if you set those aside even for a moment? What is one way you can practice flying today? Showing up without demanding guarantees. What would your life look like if you lived inside providence instead of outside it? Can you name the mercies in your own story that kept you alive when, by all logic, you should not have made it through? What do you tend to reject in yourself the way the ducks rejected the injured one? How might you nurture that part instead? Where in your life do you still carry the story of fending for yourself? What would it mean to let care arrive? What is the you that even fends for yourself?